Although my biggest love is and always will be music, my second is I'm an unashamed car geek. I probably watch as many if not more YouTube videos with car content as those with music related content. In this video I go through the top 10 cars I would one day love to have. Most are from the 1960s and the newest was last sold in the early 90s. I started number 10 in the list and worked my way up to the one I would most like to have. Last on the list, at position number 10, is the 1972 Dino 246 GT. The one on the bottom of my list is the only one that could be called an exotic. It is the Dino 246. Although it was made by Ferrari, it is not a Ferrari. It was a special model named after Enzo Ferrari's son. The beautiful body was designed by Aldo Bravarone at Pininfarina. The 246 stands for 2.4-litre six-cylinder engine in a V6 configuration, producing just under 200 horsepower and 225 Nm of torque. Quite good numbers for a car that only weighs 1,080 kilos. It is mid-engine with the motor behind the driver and passenger seats. They all had a 5-speed manual gearbox. Top speed was 235 km per hour, which is a bit under 150 miles per hour. They were sold from 1967 to 1974 in two versions, GT with a fixed roof and after 1971 the GTS with a tiger top. Total production run was 3,569, made up of 2,295 GTs and 1,274 GTSs. The main reason it's not higher in the list is the money needed to buy one and the cost of keeping it running. The only American car on this list at number 9 is the 1970 Dodge Challenger RT. The start of the 70s was the end of the muscle car era, with the big V8 still producing for that time decent amount of horsepower before the emissions rules choked them. The Dodge Charger and Challenger were Chrysler's main offerings in the powerful pony car category, along with the Plymouth Barracuda, and I prefer the look of the Challenger. They were available with a wide range of engines, ranging from 198 and 225 cubic inch, or in metric 3.2-litre and 3.7-litre slant six-cylinders, to 440 and 426 cubic inch, or in metric 7.2-litre and 7-litre V8s. The 426 was a Hemi, producing 425 horsepower, but my choice would be the 440 with triple two-barrel carburetors, which produced 390 horsepower. They were available with a hardtop, coupe or convertible. The performance version was the RT, and in 1970 there was also the TA, which was a Trans Am racing homologation car. From 1970 to 1974, around 265,000 Challengers were produced. With today's prices, it would cost more to drive a long distance than a cheap ticket flight, but it would be fun to take for short drives. First of the two German cars in this list at number 8 is the 1968 Mercedes-Benz 280 SL. Known as W113, this roadster/coupe was introduced in 1963 as the 230 SL, with 250 SL coming in 1966 and the 280 SL available from 1967 to 1971. All models were equipped with an inline six-cylinder engine with multi-port fuel injection. The bonnet, boot lid, door skins and tonneau cover were made of aluminium to reduce weight. Most of the 280 SLs would have had the automatic transmissions, but would like one with the optional ZF 5-speed gearbox. This option was only ordered in the United States on less than 900 cars, so they are very collectible. They weren't particularly powerful, with the 2.8-litre 6 producing 168 horsepower, but being relatively short and wide, they had great handling, great brakes and were quite light. Of the almost 24,000 280 SLs produced, more than half were sold in the US. It would be hard to find a good one with a 5-speed manual gearbox with a steering wheel on either side, but to find one with right-hand drive, I imagine would be extremely difficult. UK would be, I imagine, the most likely place to find one. Given the rarity, the price would be very high to buy one, and keeping it running wouldn't be cheap, but if I had a lot of money, I would look for one. The second Italian car on this list, at position number 7, is the 1969 Alfa Romeo 1750 Spider. The Series 1 Alfa Spiders were produced from 1966 to 1969, with 3 engines available during that run. They first came out with a 1570cc engine and were called the Spider 1600. This was a twin-cam engine, had dual Weber 2-barrel side-draft carburetors, and produced 108 horsepower. In 1968, a 1750 Spider Veloce was introduced with a 1779cc engine with the same configuration as the 1570 engine and produced 116 horsepower. In 1969 in North American market, the 1750 had fuel injection. There was also a lower price version, the 1300 Junior, with a 1290cc engine producing 88 horsepower and top speed of 170 km per hour or a little over 100 miles an hour. To me, the Pininfarina body is a masterpiece of car design, and the tail, the same as the nose without headlights, really appeals to me, much more than the later flat rear end. A total of around 10,000 Spiders were produced during these years of the 3 versions combined. While a reasonable 1750 wouldn't be crazy expensive to buy, it most likely would be to keep running, and one need to be prepared for long wait times for parts if they can actually be found. Certainly not a daily driver, but would be great fun when working properly. One of the 3 English cars on this list, at position number 6, is the 1972 Lotus Europa. This is the only Lotus I like enough to be willing to put up with it. A friend told me a while back something I found amusing, that the name Lotus is an acronym for lots of trouble, usually serious. The original Europas were produced from 1966 to 1975, and a bit under 10,000 were built. In the early years, they had the engine and combined transmission and final drive transaxle from the Renault 16, and from 1971 Ford-based Lotus twin-cam engine, still with the Renault 16 transmission and final drive transaxle. Quoting from Wiki, by relocating the combined engine transaxle unit to the rear of the car and rotating it 180 degrees in plan, Lotus could obtain a ready-made modern mid-engine configuration, albeit with 4 reverse gears. By repositioning the differential crown wheel within the final drive assembly, made possible by the symmetrical split case, the direction of the rotation of the output shaft was reversed, thus correcting this shortcoming. The Renault engine had a number of improvements for Lotus use, including a higher compression ratio, 10.25 instead of 8.6, larger inlet valves, revised valve timing, dual valve springs, and twin-barrel carburetor. This resulted in 23% more power than the engines in the Renault 16s, 82 horsepower. The later Lotus twin cam had up to 126 horsepower in the big valve form, and it would be my pick. Being quite tall, I would most likely not fit in it well, but I would still like to have one. The second English car on this list, in position 5, is the 1971 Ford Escort twin cam. Produced from 1968 to 1971, the Ford Escort twin cam had a Lotus twin cam engine with a capacity of 1.6 litres, producing 105 horsepower. This was basically the same engine as the later Lotus Europas and Elans. Although most Escorts were quite basic economy cars, the high-performance versions were very successful rally cars, with arguably the greatest victory being the 1970 London to Mexico World Cup Rally. A 1970 four-door 1300cc automatic Escort was the first car my parents bought in Australia, and it was the car I learned how to drive in. It was reliable once the engine was rebuilt when fairly new, and a whole new brake system replaced what came on it, also when fairly new. At least the automatic transmission never had any problems. A teacher at my high school had a bright orange twin cam, and in the late 70s, a guy I knew from university had one. The car was cosmetically in bad shape, and the engine didn't sound very good idling or going slow, but on one occasion when I was in it with him, he had to accelerate hard to get a gap in traffic and unleash the beast. I've wanted one since. Just below the top three, an Australian classic at number 4, the 1964 EH Holden. In my opinion, the best old Holden is a choice between the 1964 EH and 1967 HR. As much as I like the HR, I learned to drive manual gearboxes in a 3-on-the-3 HR. My choice is the EH. These came with a choice of two engines, 149 and 179 cubic inches, or 2.4 litres and 3 litres in metric. In the late 70s, the company my father worked for decided to sell an EH station wagon they used in their workshop, and my brother and I ended up getting it for Australian dollars 450. The car was straight, rust-free apart from the floor, and only needed the brakes fixed and the floor panels replaced. The father of a friend at school had a panel beating business and replaced the floor panels for Australian $180. It was our daily driver for a couple of years and did some longer trips, including the longest when my brother and a friend of ours drove it from Sydney to Cairns and back, total of nearly 5,000 kilometres or 3,000 miles with no problems. I ended up selling it to a friend for 550 Australian dollars after about 3 years of owning it and still regret it. He only had it for a short time before it was stolen and was never seen again. These used to be easy to pick up really cheap, but now clean ones cost a lot more than they did when they were new, with most sellers asking around 50,000 Australian dollars. Second of the two German cars in this list at position number 3, the 1971 BMW 2002 Ti. The 2002 BMW evolved from the 1602 and was produced from 1968 to 1975. They were mostly two-door, but four-door body was available as well as the Bauer Cabriolet, known as the Top Cabriolet. The 2-litre engine was available in two states of tune, single carburetor version producing 99 horsepower and twin carb producing 118 horsepower. In 1973 a turbo version came out, but because of the oil crisis only a small number of these were produced. A bit under 400,000 cars were produced if one adds up all the 2002 models in the years that they were made. I've always liked the look of them. I was driven in one in the mid-70s and I was very impressed with the handling and performance. It's the only BMW I find at all desirable. In the late 80s, my mother had a E30 318i automatic two-door, which I drove many times, and I felt severely disappointed with how gutless that car was. It was replaced with an 1800cc Corolla, certainly no speed demon, which was much more enjoyable to drive and very much better going up hills. The only French car on this list in position number 2 is the 1989 Peugeot 1.9 205 GTI. I rented a 205 GTI in the late 80s for a weekend with my brother and his wife in Canberra, which is around 3-hour drive from Sydney. It was the most enjoyable car experience I've ever had. On the way there I took a route going through some winding roads known as Macquarie Pass. It was late morning and there was no traffic, and going uphill with little chance of crashing it, I pushed it hard, and by the time I got to the top, an open road, I felt incredibly good. These cars are legendary in the hot hatch category. The GTR was first available from 1984 with a 1.6 litre engine and the 1.9 litre from 1986. Last 1.9 GTRs were made in 1994, but the last couple of years they had catalytic converters and less power. Before that, the 1.9 version produced 126 horsepower. The 1.9 had 4-wheel disc brakes, while the 1.6 drums in the back and 15-inch wheels instead of 14-inch. The 1.9 GTR is still relatively affordable, with higher mileage cars going for around 25,000 Australian dollars, but I would guess that they wouldn't be cheap to fix if major repairs were needed. In top place at number 1 is the 1969 Morris Mini Cooper S. The very first Mini rolled off the production line in 1959, the Cooper version came in 1961 and the Cooper S in 1963. For the early Coopers, the 850cc engine used in the normal Mini was stroked to make it just under 1 litre, taking it from 34 to 55 horsepower. The Cooper S got an engine just under 1.1 litres initially, and later 1275cc engines which produced 76 horsepower. Last version of the original Mini was produced in 2000, making it 41 years in production. I fell in love with the Mini in the late 60s and drove them only a couple of times, but each time really enjoyed the experience. One of my friends raced them and another built very powerful ones. He once took me for a drive in one that had the motor bored and stroked to 1800cc, and it was crazy fast. Of course, the distance between the cylinder walls and outside of the engine was tiny, so it wouldn't take much enthusiastic driving for the block to say enough is enough. I wasn't designed for this. Still, while it ran, it was amazing. It would cost me between 50 and 60,000 Australian dollars to buy a late 60s 1275 Cooper S, and there are very few for sale.